This is the story of a grandmother who sacrificed everything for her family, including her love, her money, and her life, and how she was ultimately forced to take her own life back by the humiliation she endured. The moment the grape juice hit my dress, I knew something inside me had finally broken. A momentary halt occurred in the room. I was embarrassed to see the purple stain that had crept across my white dress like a sign of shame for everyone to see. My granddaughter, who was just 8 years old at the time, looked at me with a mischievous smile while holding the empty glass as if it were a weapon that she had triumphantly used in the past. After that, there was a riot of laughter in the living room, harsh and piercing laughing. Tanisha, who was my daughter-in-law, clapped her hands and shrieked out, "Skylar, you are nothing short of terrible." There was no indication of correction in her laughing, and she had no intention of teaching her child proper behavior. The opposite was true. She appeared content, as if the nasty behavior of her daughter was something to rejoice over. In an attempt to conceal his delight, Marcus, my son, pressed his palm to his mouth. However, his sparkling eyes revealed that he was not hiding his amusement. Just like his wife, he was taking pleasure in the humiliation that came his way. They were surrounded by other visitors who were leaning closer to one another, whispering, pointing, and laughing behind their hands. I was sitting there, drenched and sticky, and my heart was slowly shattering with each and every giggle that echoed off of those walls. In a hushed voice, Skylar continued, "Mommy told you that you don't belong here." Her phony innocence pierced into me like a razor. I was so taken aback that my breath escaped me. As I shifted my attention to Tanisha, I waited for her to refute the accusation, or at the very least, for her to appear ashamed. Despite this, she continued to chuckle as she cut additional cake for the visitors, smiling with the contentment of a lady who had just completed the masterpiece she had been working on. I remained seated in my chair, rigid and shaking out of fear. My outfit, which I had purchased specifically for this event and it cost me $150, adhered to my body like a wet blanket. The decision to spend that money had been a difficult one. I had foregone meals and put off paying bills in order to give myself a reward for once so that I could enter that house with a sense of pride. I foolishly believed that perhaps things would be different this time around. Nevertheless, there was no change. Nothing would ever be different. The guests' hushed conversations became increasingly audible. Take a look at her face. What a pitiful thing. Why would she wear white in the first place? My ears were pierced by their remarks while the laughter that was going on around me boomed. I was aware that I had the option of either crying or standing up. In addition, I would not give them the satisfaction of the tears they shed. I got to my feet, and although my hands were shaking, I managed to keep my chin up. "What are you going to say, Grandma? Are you going to continue?" Skylar asked in a lovely tone, her voice containing a poisonous substance that was disguised as honey. As I said, "No, sweetie," my tone of voice was so calm that it even surprised me. There is nothing else I can say. My footsteps led me toward the kitchen. Laughter reached a higher volume behind me. The atmosphere was filled with music, as if they were trying to provide a soundtrack to my humiliation. I used a cloth to dab at the stain, although I was aware that it would not be effective. My dress had been ruined by the purple juice, and their nasty behavior had once again ruined my sense of dignity. However, as my hands worked in an uncontrollable manner, my thoughts strayed. Every humiliation, every disapproval, and every instance in which I'd been ostracized came flooding back to me. In my mind's eye, I was carrying homemade pastries that nobody ate, the act of wrapping expensive presents that no one was interested in receiving. I purchased flowers for Skylar, but she did not express gratitude for them. Every recollection engulfed me like a raging inferno. For many years, I had been telling myself that perhaps the issue was with me. Could it be that I was too dull? It is too ancient, overly simple. It's possible that they didn't intend to cause harm. Perhaps they were just thoughtless. I persuaded myself again and over again that if I made a greater effort, if I contributed more, and if I made a little bit more of a sacrifice, they would ultimately accept me. While I was standing there, wiping away a stain that seemed to have no chance of leaving, I realized the truth. They did not want me there. They failed to do so. When I eventually managed to sneak out of the house that evening, nobody noticed. Nobody said their goodbyes. I was not asked if I was okay by anyone. As I stepped into the night air, I was shivering and holding my bag tightly like a shield despite the chill. My quivering fingers misplaced my car keys, and it wasn't because I was feeling unhappy. Rather, it was because of something else, something more acute. Unwavering resolve. As I made my way back to my flat, my mind was filled with many memories, one after the other. Each and every Sunday dinner, birthday, and Christmas occasion in which I had contributed a great deal, yet received a small amount in return. In the previous year, Marcus celebrated his birthday. A watch that he had told me about had cost me $200. My feet hurt from walking for hours in order to get to the downtown area to get it. He took it out of its packaging, murmured, "Thank you, Mom," and then discarded it without giving it a second thought. After a few moments, Tanisha's present, which was a blouse that was less expensive than mine, turned out to be the most memorable part of the day. Almost immediately, he put it on, grinning broadly and flaunting it in front of everyone. Like me, my watch vanished beneath the stacks of wrapping paper and it ended up being forgotten. It was Skylar's school play that took place. I had stumbled upon the information by chance. I had not been invited by anyone. I begged to go, and when I finally showed up, I brought flowers that I couldn't afford. While Marcus and Tanisha were occupying the best seats in the front row, I was seated in the back in the row. I stood away following the conclusion of the play and the gathering of the family for photographs. Tanisha explained with a phony smile on her face that it was only being done for the parents. After that, photographs began to bombard social media. There was not a single indication that Skylar had a grandmother who cherished her throughout any of these stories. Christmas was at that time. Oh, Christmas, the festival that celebrates love and family. In order to purchase expensive presents, I would save up for months. Each one was adorned with ribbons, and I pinned love-filled cards to accompany them. They provided me with stale things that were not wrapped, creams that were only partially used, and leftover garbage. In any case, I smiled. I expressed my gratitude to them as if they had bestowed upon me prizes, mostly due to the fact that they anticipated my silence, my unending thanks, and my unconditional obedience. The house, of course, was the next thing to be considered. I had co-signed for the house that I had almost lost everything to protect, and I had co-signed for it. Marcus had pleaded with me, saying, "Mom, this is nothing more than a formality," because I wanted to believe that I was a part of their future. I signed the document that stated you won't have to pay a thing. Instead, I received calls from the bank which said payments are overdue, Miss Dupree. I decided to use up all of my savings funds. Another job was taken on by me. During the time that they were remodeling the kitchen with my money and throwing parties without inviting me, I was responsible for keeping their house alive. The humiliation that occurred tonight, which included the grape juice and the laughs, turned out to be the most severe of 1,000 wounds. However, it was also the final one. By the time I arrived at my apartment that evening, I had not shed a tear. I did not cry myself to sleep like I had done so many numerous times in the past. Instead, I was staring at the ceiling, and I was experiencing something that I hadn't felt in years. The power. Because all of a sudden, I was finished. Following Robert's passing, I recalled Marcus pleading for financial assistance. His tone of voice, his fury, and his guilt trips whenever I had the audacity to question repayment. Every emergency, every favor, and every demand that was disguised as a family responsibility were all ingrained in my memory. The sneer that Tanisha gave me when she asked for money for vacations and told me that Skylar shouldn't feel left out simply because some people couldn't afford to go to the beach was something that I remembered. In addition, I had provided it. My knees hurt from scrubbing floors to cover bills that weren't even mine, and I had given until I had nothing left behind. I had given until I had nothing left, but not any longer. That night, when I glanced into the mirror, I no longer saw a woman who was fragile and lonely. Having been asleep for a number of years, I witnessed the icy determination of a person who had at long last managed to come to. I had it in my head for many years that I was helping them because I loved them. More difficult was the reality. It was because I was afraid that I assisted them. Terrified of being by oneself. I was terrified of finding out the reality, which was that my one and only son did not love me at all. I was terrified of admitting that I had been nothing more than a wallet with legs attached to it. On the other hand, fear lost its hold on me. I was aware of the actions that I needed to do. It would be different the following day. As of tomorrow, I would make the initial call that would completely alter the course of events. And at long last, they would discover the truth about who I was. Tomorrow arrived far sooner than I had anticipated. My eyes were wide open as I awoke in the dreary morning light, and I was awake before the alarm went off. When I got out of bed, I didn't have the sensation of being loaded down for the first time in years. There was no pain in my chest. There was no shaking in my hands because I was afraid of what was waiting for me. Instead, I had a sharp sensation. Wake up. All set. I took a seat at the little kitchen table in my home, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and took a look at the pile of papers that I had removed from my old safety box the previous evening. Receipts for payments received there are bank slips, the documents for the loan, documents that require co-signing, years of evidence to support it, signs that I have made a sacrifice. The evidence that they were manipulating. The entire thing was shown in a black and white. I had never before witnessed such a state of disarray. I was able to see a plan. First call came in at precisely 9 o'clock in the morning. Best wishes for the morning, Attorney Jenkins. Hey, my name is Estelle, DRI. It is imperative that we meet today. It is in a hurry. A pause occurred on the other end of the line. In the years following the passing of my husband Robert, Silas Jenkins had served as my attorney for minor things. Even though he was in his 70s, he remained as smart as ever. Of course it is Estelle. Where does this come from? It has to do with the mortgage for my son. My name is no longer going to be used as a co-signer. Once again, there was a lull, but this time it was longer. Estelle, you are aware of what my statement means. A complete payback may be required by the bank. They might file a foreclosure. Yes, I answered with conviction. That is precisely what I want to take place for me. When I was on the other end of the line, I could almost hear him changing his spectacles. At last, he announced, come by at 3 o'clock. Bring all of the documents that you own. My hands remained steady as I hung up the phone. Over the course of several years, each and every call I made in the morning was preoccupied with assisting my family in surviving yet another so-called emergency. But this call was not like the others. I was asked to take this call. The bank was the recipient of the second call. Mr. Sterling, the loan officer who had been in charge of Marcus and Tanisha's case, was the person I reached out to. Instantaneously, he recalled me. After all, I was the one who had called each and every time payments were late. The words Miss DRI came out of his mouth with a shocked tone. They are current this month. Do we have a problem here? The response I gave was, there is no problem. I would like to merely withdraw my responsibility as a co-signer, she said. I would appreciate it if you could email me the necessary documentation so that we can get started. He paused for a moment. You are aware that the bank will require prompt payments of the balance in the event that your son and his wife are unable to qualify due to their own circumstances. Affirmative, Mr. Sterling. That is precisely what I realized to be the case. The call was terminated before he could continue to speak. After letting out a deep breath, I sat back in my chair and relaxed back. It was finished. The initial actions were carried out. I smiled for the very first time in what seemed like years. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. Suddenly, I was startled awake by the ringing of the phone. I was able to identify Marcus even before I picked up the phone. He spoke in a frenetic manner. Mom, a letter was delivered to us by the bank. It indicates that you are going to remove your co-signature. Surely, this is an error on my part. Please tell me that I am wrong. Being as calm as ice, I sat up. Mr. Marcus, this is not just a mistake. There is no error in the letter. There is no sound. His worry was audible through the line, and I could hear him breathing heavily for a moment. Why would you do anything like this, Mom? To what extent is this due to the party? Skylar is just a child, so of course she didn't mean it. Pranks are played by children. In a low voice, I responded, "Of course, Marcus. Kids are going to be kids. Grape juice, however, is not the topic at hand. Over the course of the past 6 years, I have been responsible for maintaining a home in which I am not welcome, the house that I paid for, but I was never invited to be a part of in any meaningful way." His respiration became very rapid. "Please, Mom. This is where we call home. This is where Skylar is from. You are unable to accomplish this. The house that I have been paying for while you have been throwing parties without me is this one. I never got to see the house that I had financed, which had a kitchen. You are going to acquire the ability to take responsibility for your own decisions. It is Mom, please." I hung up the phone. After waiting for 5 minutes, the phone rang once again. It was Tanisha who did it this time. She did not show any signs of terror. It was a raging rage. "Essie, you have the audacity to do this. Have you decided that you are going to ruin the life of your own granddaughter because of an elderly woman's outburst? It is a bitter taste. You are a vain person. What I've always known about you is being demonstrated by you." I addressed Tanisha in a chilly manner and stated, "You made the decision to laugh at me, to humiliate me, and to use me as nothing more than a wallet. You are going to find a way to survive without my assistance. Bitterness is not the same thing. It is fair to say that." Her voice erupted into a scream that was dripping with poison. "You are insanity in your old age. You are going to be sorry." This time I hung up. In addition, I disconnected the phone from its power supply this time. Marcus started out by waiting for me outside of my place of employment. His face was exhausted and his eyes were crimson. First, he pleaded with me. "Mom, can we make this right? Please, I beg of you." When I didn't buckle under the pressure, his statements became more pointed. "We'll change. We are being ruined by you. I have no idea what I will do if you do not put an end to this scenario." He was told the truth by me. "Marcus, you have never expressed forgiveness. You have simply lessened the impact of what you have done. You won't be able to make any changes until you confront the reality." The following day, I discovered that my car had been keyed. Egoist was the only word that was cut deeply into the paint. The cops arrived, made notes, and instructed me to set up surveillance cameras. That it might become worse before it got better was something they stated. They were correct in their assessment. One evening, eggs were splattered all over my door. The next thing I knew, red paint balloons were bursting against my windows. Clearly, someone wanted me to be terrified in the comfort of my own house. The worst possible moment then arrived. Skylar was still wearing her school uniform when I discovered her sitting on the stairs of my apartment building one afternoon. Her small face was covered in tears by the time I reached her. "Grandma," she cried out in tears, "Mom asserts that you are causing us to lose our house. Is that the case?" I felt a sting of shame for a brief minute. In her youth, she was a child. Then, however, I recalled the way in which she had smiled at me while she was pouring grape juice over me. She said, "Mommy says you don't belong here." I found myself remembering her words. In a crouching position, I took hold of her shoulders. "I am sorry, Skylar, but you are not responsible for this. It is important to convey to your parents that decisions are made by grown-ups. Even though Grandma loves you, you are not responsible for fixing this. After that, I walked her back to her house. Tanisha and Marcus were waiting at the entrance to the room. Angry expressions could be seen on Tanisha's face. Skylar, who was clinging to Tanisha's leg, was the target of Marcus's effect. Take a look at anything you're doing to her. You want your granddaughter to go through pain, don't you? I stared him in the eye without any falsehoods. Skylar's parents are the only individuals who are causing her harm since they have taught her that it is normal to show contempt to her grandchildren. There are repercussions for actions. The moment has come for you to learn that. Someone had a letter affixed to my door. You insane old woman, this is your last opportunity. If you do not sign the documents, the situation will get even more dire. This was the first time that I hesitated. There was a return of fear. Did I go too far with this? Is it worth it to do this? Then, however, I recall the laughter that was heard at the gathering, the liquid that was trickling down my neckline. I was surprised by Marcus's dismissal of my gifts. When Tanisha took my money, she did it with a sneering expression. It wasn't that I had gone too far. I was just embarking on this journey. Moreover, what followed would alter everything in an irreversible manner. When I received the call, it was on a Wednesday morning, and I had just finished eating breakfast. It was a number that was known to me. An agitated yet subdued female voice could be heard on the other end of the line. Mrs., my name is Brenda Miller, and I am Estelle. While I was employed at the construction company, your son and I were co-workers. I must come and see you. This pertains to Marcus. Yes, it is essential. My chest became more taut. My recollection of Brenda was hazy. She was a kind woman who had always welcomed me with courtesy whenever I went to visit Marcus at his previous place of employment. What is the purpose of this? I inquired. Not over the phone, she added in a hurried manner. I would appreciate it if you could meet me in the cafe located on 4th Street at 2 o'clock. Bring no one with you. Her voice shook, as if she were shaking with fear that someone was listening to her. No, I concur. I entered the cafe about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Already there, Brenda was clinging to a manila folder as if it were a lifeline from which she could escape. The nervousness in her gaze caused her to look around until she found me. She motioned for me to come over, and I sat down opposite of her. Mrs., I shouldn't be showing you this, she muttered to Estelle. I should be sorry, but I believe that you have a right to know. Marcus was not relieved of his duties just due to layoffs. He had committed theft. He falsified the bills. He made up the numbers. The owner of the company wanted to prevent a scandal. Therefore, the company did not press charges until we found out about it after he had already left. Within were copies of invoices, each of which had been amended by hand. In the end, a $300 order was worth $1,300. The receipt for $200 was converted into $700. My lungs were emptied of air. To what extent did he consume? It was a whisper that she said, at least $8,000. It is merely the evidence that we were able to provide. I stood there, numb, staring at the documents for a few period. The son I have. It was the same son who had come to me begging for money, telling me that he was in a difficult situation and that he was just having poor luck. The same son who had caused me to feel uneasy about questioning him in the first place. On top of that, he had been stealing from other people. Brenda extended her hand and made contact with my hand. There is more to it. Marcus boasted about having tricked you into co-signing the house, according to Patrice, who works in human resources. In his words, you are signing something that you did not fully comprehend. The fact that you were frightened of losing your family made it very simple for him to manipulate you, and he laughed about such things. Her words cut faster and more deeply than any knife. The son I have. This is my own flesh and blood. Laughing about the way he managed to trick me. I shut the folder, and my hands were shaking as I did so. You are so kind, Brenda. You have provided me with everything I required. I shared everything with him. With the document strewn across his desk, I found myself in his office by the time Dawn arrived. Every time he turned a page, his eyebrows became more defined and raised. In a solemn tone, he eventually addressed Estelle, saying, "This is a serious matter. Marcus might be subject to criminal prosecution if this material is made public. It's not simply that he's a terrible son. The man is a liar. A person who steals." My voice was soft as I whispered, "I do not want to destroy my son. However, I would like to safeguard myself. What I need to do is get ready in case he sues me." Silas gave a slight nod. "After that, we will make sure the bank is aware of the situation and prepare sworn statements and testimony. It is you who has been the victim here. Your defense will be built to withstand any attack. After a very long time, I finally had a sense of security. Indeed, not entirely, but more powerful." Mainly due to the fact that he arrived at my apartment building the following evening with two men whom I had never seen before. They were large and had a harsh appearance. They were the kind of men who could make you feel terrified without you even having to speak. Marcus started off by saying, "Mom," with an oddly serene tone, "these are my family members. They believe that we ought to resolve this matter as a family. There are no attorneys. There are no banks. Only the two of us." Attempting to muster a smile, one of the males took a step forward. "Mrs. Your son has a deep affection for you, Estelle. There is a misunderstanding here. Perhaps we can assist in resolving it. Fights between families should not be like this." The second man laughed in a sinister manner. "Sometimes persons of a certain age become confused. They fail to remember what is favorable for everyone. The pit of my stomach has become solid. In order to scare me, my own son had brought guys with him, so that I am frightened into obedience." On the other hand, he was unaware that I had already equipped myself with the truth. I took my phone out of my purse and displayed a picture of one of the fraudulent invoices that Brenda had sent to me. "Marcus," I replied in a chilly tone, "tell your friends to leave. Instruct your wife to refrain from making threats. The police may be notified about all of this." Lie after lie. Every single theft, he appeared to be in complete and utter disbelief for a little moment. Then there is terror. "Where did you get that?" he replied with a stutter. I told her, "There is no need for you to know." "It is sufficient for you to know that I am no longer afraid of you," she instructed. Marcus was scrutinized by the men as they waited for a signal. His jaw was clenched and he turned his head. "Let's get going." I observed them as they left. For the very first time, I was in control. A legal action was taken against me by them. There was a lawsuit filed against me, alleging that I had knowingly abandoned them, ruined their stability, and exploited them financially. Specifically, they wanted the court to assume that I was a vengeful elderly woman seeking retribution. When Silas read the newspaper, he couldn't help but chuckle out loud. Estelle, this is a present for you. It is because of you that they have opened the door. All of the evidence can now be presented to the judge. Therefore, we made preparations. To Brenda, it is Patrice. A supervisor named Darren was the one who discovered Marcus taking tools. At one point, Marcus allegedly requested Leonard, an accountant, to fabricate income statements. Leonard told me about this. Following one another, individuals stepped out to reveal the truth. When I arrived to the courthouse on the day of the trial, I was wearing my black suit. I had a proud attitude. Marcus and Tanisha were seated with their attorney, Arthur Trevino, on the opposite side of the room. It appeared as though Tanisha was the victim, as she donned a phony expression of sorrow. Not even Marcus was able to look me in the eye. The judge, a severe woman called Evelyn Thorne, was unimpressed with their allegations on the courtroom floor. Mr., your clients are suing because Miss DRI exercised her legal right to withdraw as a cosigner, she remarked to Trevino. Is this the reason? I want to see the law that establishes that as a violation. His speech was stuttering. He was unable to provide an answer. It was then our turn to speak. Standing tall was Silas. My client is not doing maliciously, Your Honor, I assure you of that. After being subjected to years of emotional and financial abuse, she is behaving in a manner that any sensible person would. Those bank slips were handed by him. Those installments on the mortgage that I had covered, the loans that I had provided, above $43,000 in a span of 6 years. The judge's eyes became somewhat narrow. Afterward, the witnesses appeared. The faked invoices were the subject of Brenda's testimony. Darren went on to talk about stolen tools. Patrice made reference to fabricated hours. Leonard said that Marcus had pleaded with him to conceal his income. After, it was my chance to speak. I stood up. Although I was shaking in my knees, my voice did not. I am a mother, Your Honor, I declare. I held 2 jobs at the same time. My son received everything that I had. His house, his holidays, and his renovations were all paid for by me. Furthermore, I was treated as if I were a burden in return. I was made to laugh at, made to feel ashamed. After they had finished clapping, my granddaughter flung juice at me. It was on that day that I realized and accepted the reality they do not love me. They adore what I am able to provide for them. It was I who detailed the vandalism. I posted a note on my door. The individuals whom Marcus brought to terrify me. Never once did my voice crack. I finished, and there was complete silence in the courtroom. When the judge needed to deliberate, she excused herself. After waiting for an hour, she came back with her authority. The judge has determined that Mrs. Estelle DRI acted in a manner that was completely within her legal rights. Additionally, this court has found that there is compelling evidence that Mr. Marcus DRI has engaged in a pattern of fraudulent activity and manipulation. The legal action has been dropped. At a total of $4,500, Mr. and Mrs. Doctors will be responsible for paying their mother's legal fees. The court will also issue a restraining order to prevent any additional harassment from occurring. Tanisha let out a gasp. Marcus's face became a pallid color. Silas gave my shoulder a little squeeze. This is more than just a lawsuit that you've won, Estelle. The battle for your life has been won. Indeed, he was correct. As a result of the fact that life will never be the same after the trial, a restraining order prevented them from coming into contact with one another. Soon after the foreclosure was completed, the house was not returned to Marcus and Tanisha. They relocated to a roomy apartment in the city. Suddenly, their companions vanished. It was a collapse of their lifestyle. And for the first time in what seemed like years, I experienced a sense of liberation. When I stopped providing financial support to them, I used the money I saved to start a modest cafe. My late spouse was the inspiration for the name Robert's Corner. My offerings included sandwiches, pastries, and coffee. In spite of its lack of elegance, it was mine. Brenda was the first person I ever hired here. It was a warm place full of laughter, the type of laughter that healed rather than hurt, and she said working for you is an honor. Customers began to come in little by little until the cafe became a warm place full of laughter. I started over with my life. At the same moment when I believed the storm had passed, I came across him. It's Marcus. While he was standing across the street, his work clothes were soiled, and his eyes were locked on my cafe. He had lost weight. It was not he who entered. It was silent from him. He simply stood there and looked at me for a few minutes before leaving. In addition, I noticed something in his eyes that I had never noticed before. Nevertheless, respect was not the same thing as forgiveness, and what was to come would put me to the test in ways that I could not have imagined. 2 weeks later, the first test was administered. On a certain occasion, when I was shutting the cafe, I noticed that a note had been stowed away behind the door. The penmanship appeared hurried, and the envelope turned out to be crumpled. My heart was thumping quite quickly as I lifted it up with some reluctance. On the inside was a brief note that read, "Mom, we are sorry. We are aware that we made a mistake. Skylar is longing for you. Kindly give me a call." The phrases captivated my attention as I sat at one of the tables in the cafe. They appeared to be straightforward. They appeared to be genuine. But how could I ever believe them after years of being told lies? Did you feel genuine regret? Alternatively, is it just another attempt to entice me to return to their cycle? I failed to show up. No, not at this point in time. As an alternative, I folded the message and tucked it away in the pocket of my apron. I was in need of some time. When morning arrived, the air was thick with the aroma of cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee. In order to study, students came. Conversations were held in a calm setting with elderly couples. One of my regulars turned into a new family, one that did not take advantage of me but rather valued me. In many instances, Mr. Manuel, the widower who came to my house every morning, lingered to assist me in cleaning tables or carrying boxes. It was like sunlight coming in through a window that I hadn't opened in years while I was in his lovely company. Except for when I brought it up, we never discussed Marcus at any point. In no way did he judge me. Simply put, he listened. The same kind of presence had a curative effect. Then, however, the second examination happened. Skylar was standing at the doorway when I looked up from the counter one afternoon. I was surprised to see her there. She appeared to have grown taller and more mature than her 10 years. One of her shoulders was equipped with a school bag. Those eyes of hers were unsure. She hushed Grandma as she spoke. I was unable to move for a considerable amount of time. My hands were shaking. The same child who had dumped juice on me while laughing was the one who was doing this now. In addition to that, she was my granddaughter. My blood is, oh, my heart. Taking my time, I made my way around the counter. Say, Skylar. The tears began to well up in her eyes. I'm sorry, Grandma, I said. I was not aware of such information. I am not sure what you mean by that. It was my mother who told me things that were not true. Then again, now I see it. Suddenly, she started crying, and her shoulders began to shake. I felt a breaking in my heart. I got down on my knees and encircled her in its embrace. During her sobs, she clutched to me. For the first time in how many years, I was able to feel her warmth without the presence of any poison. The words, "I missed you, Grandma," were hushed by her. I uttered in a low voice, "I missed you as well. It was my intention." The first time she visited, she was timid and sat at a table in the corner while she was completing her homework. It was hot chocolate and cookies that I presented to her. She gradually regained her smile on her face. She inquired about the plants I had. It was her inquiry on the cakes. At one point, she even requested that I instruct her in the art of baking. It was the first time that I experienced hope. Possibly, she will develop in a different way. It's possible that she could learn to be respectful, kind, and honest. On the other hand, Marcus and Tanisha continued to cast a shadow over my life. When I was walking home one evening, I noticed that they were waiting close to where I lived. It appeared as though Marcus had lost weight. While Tanisha's eyes retained their sharpness, there was a clear sign of tiredness beneath them. Marcus began his statement by saying, "Mom," in a quiet voice, "we've lost everything. The home, one's companions, a sense of ease. What we did is now being paid for by us. Please, assist us in getting back up. Only one more time, please." I was attracted to him, to my son. My one and only son. It was the youngster that I had once held in my arms, the boy who had once come to me to give me cuddles. He was a guy who had been broken by his own decisions, but now he stood there. "I have already assisted you," Marcus said. "I have been of assistance to you for many years. You made use of me each and every time. Each and every time you showed me disrespect. What gives me reason to believe that this time is different?" He shook his lips in fear. There was not a single excuse that he could offer. He did not place blame on me. It was not a shouting. Just like that, he bowed his head. "Because there is nothing else for us to do, Mom." There was a crack in Tanisha's voice. "You can't just quit on us like this," she said. "You are a member of the family." "Family members?" With a firm tone, I repeated the phrase. When someone is humiliated, family members do not laugh at them. Your car is not vandalized by members of your family. It is not appropriate for a family to send men to threaten their own mother. Not at all, Tanisha. Your path was chosen by you. On top of that, you're walking it now. I retreated from the situation. The shaking in my hands was accompanied by a strong step. After a few months, the cafe was doing very well. It was another part-time employee that I had hired. There were poetry nights and tail swaps that we held. In a way that I hadn't experienced in decades, I felt alive. After attending church on a certain Sunday, I opened my mailbox and saw a letter from the government. This information came from the Chamber of Commerce. They wanted to feature me in the newspaper with a photo and an article about how I had begun again at the age of 66. My cafe had been selected as the Small Business of the Month. My eyes welled up with tears. For years, I had been out of sight, ridiculed, useful. Strangers now recognize me as someone who is powerful, capable, and valued. I put that letter in a frame and suspended it on the wall of the cafe. The following day, when Skylar saw it, she excitedly clapped her hands and told her grandmother, "Grandma, I am so proud of you." Words like those helped mend wounds that had been open for a number of years. At some point in the late evening, when I had finished closing the cafe, I walked out and found him standing across the street still. The man did not yell. Not once did he get close. He did nothing but stand there and observe. Because of his labor, his clothing were filthy. Clearly, he was exhausted. His eyes, which I had once known so well, appeared to be filled with regret, like they were heavy. Moreover, I noticed something in him that I hadn't noticed in him in decades for the very first time. We are not arrogant, certainly not a right, and not rage. On the other hand, humility. He made a tiny gesture with his hand as if he were waving, and then he lowered it. Without making a sound, he turned around and went away. I stood there, feeling the chilly night air brush against my face as I pondered whether or not the passage of time could ever mend the rift that had developed between us. The cafe expanded over time. Respect was lavished upon me by my chosen family, which included customers, friends, and neighbors. My money was no longer a source of anxiety for me. I no longer had to worry about unexpected emergencies or late-night visits. My honor was mine to keep. My peace was mine to keep. I had been separated from my previous family, but in the process, I had discovered who I was. I was aware that forgiveness might come at some point in the future, but not just yet. Both respect and trust had to be earned before they could be reestablished. I was not in a state of dire need of it, which was a first in my life. As a result of my coming to terms with this is not the best form of retribution. The best kind of retribution is not punishment. Living well is the best form of retribution, and that was just what I was doing at the time. This is a tale of suffering, self sacrifice, and betrayal, but also of fortitude, healing, and liberation. Leave a comment below and tell me what things you would have done if you had been in my position. If you found this story to be enjoyable, I would appreciate it if you would give it a like, share it with someone who might be in need of it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss all of my future life stories, mostly due to the fact that every story is more than just words. It is a lesson. Have a good time in the next one. Blue Heart.